Well, the first week of the new NHL year has come and gone. And with that, we begin a new year of devoting our entire mental health to a team that rarely, if ever, returns the favor. The draft is concluded, the free agency frenzy has died down, and the Bruins prospect development camp has left us with a lot to work with. As the insane Bostonian I always am, I try to keep my eyes on everything that was happening. There were some great moments, there were some not so great moments, there was a lovely time spent with some lovely people. So let's get into it, starting with some of the hirings made, then going into the draft, free agency, and then finally our annual 4-day trip to dev camp, with commentary from more people than last year. I will just say this before I get into the meat of the video though. A professional scout, I am not. Every observation being made here is simply that of someone wanting to be invested in the development of the prospects in the system, but without the trained eye to be able to point out the subtle showings of what a prospect's game actually looks like. If anybody thinks I missed something in my analysis, let me know in the comments below, especially if you also went to dev camp. But before we get into that, as per usual, my videos are made 100% by me without the use of any AI. I write, record, edit, and produce everything here myself. This is purely a one-person operation. So if you want to uplift the integrity of independent content here on YouTube, leave a like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment down below. Thank you all so much for 2,000 subscribers. Now let's get to the new faces in the front office. I suppose it wouldn't be Boston without hiring a former first-round pick of the team as their new assistant general manager. Good old boys club rules. Don't ask what he did with the team when he was with them. He played at Miami, Ohio for 4 years and then opted for free agency. For all intents and purposes, this is Kevyn Adams' first time being an employee of the Boston Bruins in any meaningful capacity. You may remember him from the tragedy that was the Buffalo Sabres for the first half of the 2020s. And he shouldered a lot of the blame for the team cratering. It's not great when one of your first trades taking over the much maligned Jason Botterill is Taylor Hall and Curtis Lazar for Anders Bjork and a second-round pick. But beyond that, the team was simply just awful. They were at an impasse with Jack Eichel, and it was rubbing off on everyone, from Sam Reinhart to Rasmus Ristolainen to Linus Ullmark. Much as it must have hurt to see Eichel and Reinhart win cups in different jerseys, Ullmark pull off one of the best seasons a goalie has ever had, and Risto to keep being Risto. It cleaned the slate for Buffalo to build back up from the bottom to trek into the future with a new core of Zach Benson, Tage Thompson, Rasmus Dahlin, Owen Power, and Alex Tuch before he got traded. We'll get into that sort of frenzy later. As an assistant GM of Boston, I don't know how to feel about him. He made plenty of boneheaded decisions that I don't think are indicative of someone who should be a general manager. But the Sabres wouldn't likely be in as advantageous a position as they're in now without him. But I think we should also talk about the other piece the Bruins added. New assistant coach Matt McIlvane, most recently head coach of the San Diego Gulls, the AHL affiliate of the Anaheim Ducks. This might actually be pretty good. Most relevant to the situation, he served as an assistant coach to Marco Sturm on the German national team's 2018 Olympic run, where they ended up winning silver. For the past 3 years with the Gulls, though, they've not been great. But there is one very, very important caveat to that. Look at the amount of prospects the Anaheim Ducks in the past 3 years have had turn into home runs. Ultimately, I think having a strong developmental coach as a supplement to the head coach is a very strong move. While I believe having him in Providence would have also been beneficial, with the wealth of prospects that are expected to have little, if any, time in the AHL prior to making their debut in the system, having someone who is shown to give the young guns space to thrive is very encouraging. Now, on their way out are two coaches. One I'm kinda sad to see leave, and another I couldn't be happier to see leave. First up is Jay Leach, going from one of the assistant head coaches, primarily in charge of the defense and penalty kill, to the head coach of the Hartford Wolfpack of the AHL. Leach had been on and off part of the Bruins, and just recently had been in charge of the defense and penalty kill. Under him, the defense kinda grew stagnant, not really being much better than middle of the pack at any point, but the penalty kill remained a strong point to the Bruins. There was a lot to be upset with the team for the past few years, but the PK always remains strong. Here's hoping he carves out a good system in Hartford. As for the one I'm happy about, goodbye Ryan Mougenel. After several great seasons as the head coach of the Providence Bruins, where he never got past the first round of the playoffs and only developed 2 players into consistent NHL players over the span of 5 years, he has finally been picked up as an assistant head coach in Vancouver. Bad at player development and bad at winning in the playoffs. Sounds like a perfect fit in Vancouver. If this ends up being the piece to move that gets Patra into the lineup in Boston consistently, I'm going to take the biggest victory lap ever. However, as much as I was happy at the start of this segment on Mougenel, I am wary about celebrating too hard right now, given the fact that a new Providence head coach has not been named. Whoever mans the helm there in the future could be better than Mujinel. He could also be worse than Mujinel. For now, I'm simply sighing in relief that one of the biggest pieces of the organization that needed change has finally been addressed. Now that we've gotten the new hires out of the way, time to start talking about the new blood in the prospect system. This is gonna hurt a little. Just to get it out of the way, I think this is a significant step back from the 2025 draft. Where Sweeney handled that one remarkably, this one was a bit iffy. And the biggest example is in the first pick. It might not be as bad as people thought it was, but it demonstrates a radical shift in the trajectory of the organization's development. Yes, my lovely lesbians, Yuri is now legal in Boston. May we rejoice and blast Pink Pony Club out of all of our Subarus in celebration. In all seriousness, this is a selection that marks a definitive shift in the development philosophy of the Bruins, and one that has serious implications for the future of the team. With this pick, Sweeney is effectively saying that the prospects from here on out will not be able to come up and supplement a roster built around Pastrnak and McAvoy, and are using this pick to, instead, build around Hagens once he takes over the reins as the guy in Boston. All things considered with Ivanov, a strong showing in Spartak this past season has me very excited. Given the fact that he's 17 in Russia, he's another guy you're not going to see until 2030 at the earliest. But the future for the Bruins seemingly looking strong on offense with Hagens, Letourneau, Zellers, Minton, and Husnudinov, and decent on the back end as well with Blanash and Johansson, getting someone like Ivanov isn't the worst thing you can do. And while he may have been the 10th ranked goalie going into the draft, there's still reason to be excited for him in the future. You don't particularly expect point per game production in Swedish juniors to still go down all the way to the third round. But some aspects to Bartholdson's game remain rather unpolished as compared to some of his classmates. But when people are finding similarities between you and 8th overall pick Viggo Bjork, maybe such a rough gem can be cut into something very worthwhile. And when he's on, Bartholdsson is very worthwhile. With exceptional ice vision and, for his size at sub 6 feet, proficiency at board battles, the crown jewel of Bartholdson's toolkit is his shot. Strong, accurate, and a hell of a release. While his skating still needs some work, it's nothing he can't drastically improve on. Diet Viggo Bjork is still Viggo Bjork to some extent at the end of the day. Well, blow my mind and call me a Lincoln. The Boston Bruins have drafted 2 Russians in the same year. When the Boston Bruins drafted Kasper Nassen out of Västerås in the 7th round of 2023, the general consensus scouts reached was that every part of his toolkit was a 4 to 6 year project except for exactly his shot. 3 years later, and they have essentially drafted Kasper Nassen again, but with a higher floor and higher ceiling. Kotkov has had a solid amount of success in the MHL so far, especially with a 15-point campaign in the playoffs that netted him playoff MVP. But beyond his shot, there is not very much that he has that stands out, and that kind of worries me. Because that reminds me a lot of Brett Harrison. Harrison had one of the nastiest shots in recent Bruins prospect history, but had nothing else to supplement it, and he became one of the most frustrating stories year in and year out with that lack of progress. I have faith that Kotkov can be better than that, but I need to be able to see it translate better on the score sheet. Potentially being line mates with fellow Bruins prospect Kirill Yemelyanov could help develop a prospect kinship, but it remains to be seen. Olsen is a prototypical mid-round power forward, someone whose potential is almost entirely seen in his offensive upside, as evidenced by a 30-point campaign in 32 games this past year. His defensive capabilities are questionable at best, and some scouts have even noted that he looks actively disinterested in playing in defense, or even winning puck battles, which is not what you want to see out of a power forward, but who knows. Maybe Sweeney liked the offensive upside to his game too much to pass up on him. It's also not something that can't be taught. His physicality complements his game a lot, and I think that can turn him into a valuable asset. Hey, nothing wrong with a solid offensive defenseman pick. Several performances in the GOJHL above half a point per game is nothing to sneeze at, and going to a program like London next year is sure to develop him further into a solid two-way guy. The surprising part of Van Deven's game is his speed. For 6'6", 207, he's surprisingly fleet-footed and can facilitate putting the team in transition decently well. Very raw potential, but I see a little bit of Vasek Blanash in him, and that's the farthest from a bad thing. Well, good gosh golly, the Bruins went ahead and drafted 2 goaltenders. Henriquez fell heavily in the draft after a rough transition from Slovakia to the USHL, but recovered very well in his second year, posting a league-best .922 save percentage. One of the most cerebral and anticipatory goalies in the draft, Henriquez might actually be something of a diamond in the rough for the Bruins. However, with the current logjam at goalie being Swayman, DiPietro, Zajac, and now Ivanov as well, there are certainly fears that he ends up going the way of a certain Dan Vladar. No matter what, he has the toolbox that would make him a solid NHL goaltender, even as a 6th round pick. All that matters now is whether or not he can fill it up with tools to elevate his game, and he should be able to do that at Boston College. Say the line, Felger.
I'm sick to death up to here with the
local kids.
McCrate is a defenseman whose presence is mostly felt when he's not on the ice. He quietly does his job as a shutdown defenseman, but with a nifty little scoring touch in his most recent season in Fargo. Hopefully he can keep that up going to Michigan State next year. He forces opposing forwards to play low to the ground and can facilitate some good rushes on offense as well. A simple jack-of-all-trades guy who has a small window between his floor and his ceiling. Not a bad pick, but a 7th round pick if there ever was one. This offseason can best be summed up by one phrase: proactivity. While many leagues would end up with a lot of movement happening the first moment of free agency, the vast majority of the surprises of 2016 happened prior to even the draft. Assets and picks were being thrown around like candy, with some general managers absolutely losing their minds for immediate relief, and others amassing major pick hauls to build their future dynasties. Boston, for the vast majority of this offseason, was quiet. Only one trade of theirs preceded the draft. Gasso and the Bruins were undoubtedly at an impasse. The former 7th round pick was a tad disgruntled given the retention of his rights by a team that had very little intention of giving him the ice time he wanted. I don't blame him for wanting out. But in the same breath, I don't blame the front office for not being able to guarantee Gasso NHL ice time given the current trajectory of the roster. The only place it makes sense for Gasso to play is the 4th line, and do you really want to try and break up the line of Jeannot, Corrali, and Kastelik? The 2 picks the Bruins got were used on Kotkov in the 4th and Van Deven in the 5th. I'd say they got their money's worth. And now for the trade the fan base has been talking about for the past few weeks. This is certainly a move, and a really good one at that. Wing depth has been an issue ever since even before DeBrusk left. If it was bad with him here, imagine how bad it's been without him. Peterka is a strong scorer with multiple 25-goal campaigns. A great showing in Utah, even where he didn't fit well, is very encouraging. Except now, instead of Barrett Hayton or Logan Cooley up the middle, you have Fraser Minton or Pavel Zacha. Amazing step up, no shade to Cooley or Hayton. Rising tides and all that, but it definitely helps when your line mates are able to facilitate better production from you. Not to mention, he's German, with a German head coach now. That sort of chemistry I think can work very well between them. Never underestimate how much not having to worry about a language barrier helps people acclimate. Let's be real, we mostly just cared that Korpisalo was gone. While he remains a solid goaltender in the league, with the current logjam the Bruins have at goaltender, his age and occasional inconsistency made him prime trade bait, especially to a team that just lost Jonathan Quick to retirement. With Korpi now out of the picture, DiPietro is primed to take the role as Swayman's backup, with Simon Zajac as the primary netminder in Providence. And the best part about this trade is there's no salary retention, meaning the combined cap hit for the Bruins goaltenders drops from roughly $13 million per year to just over $9 million. Incredible relief. Sort of like with the Hall and Foligno cap dumps back in 2023, the return here is negligible. Vaisanen's production doesn't really show up on the score sheet very often, and the draft pick is tantamount to magic beans. Who knows what will happen in 2028. All I will say is that with the wealth of prospects Sweeney ends up finding in the 4th, keep an eye out. Ooh, this hurts. As I'm sure I've made it evident, I think that Lysell got a raw deal here in Boston. A rigid development structure that ignored his strengths and exacerbated his weaknesses definitely gave him an environment where his failure was inevitable. However, after a few days, I've come around to having to admit that his lackadaisical attitude in several moments was never going to warrant him being anything better than he was in Boston. Sending him to a team like Colorado, whose entire structure is built on speedy forwards who get pucks in deep and sustain offensive pressure, is about the best situation the Bruins could have sent Lysell to. And although Ivan won't ever have the offensive upside as Lysell, he's at least shown he cares for playing in the defensive zone, and can provide adequate penalty killing, while also providing the Bruins with the absolute best name in all of hockey right now. And here comes the trade that a lot of people seem to be upset about for reasons I can't ascertain. Borgen has been a strong defensive presence on the right side for his entire career. And looking to the Bruins' right side, where the options after Charlie McAvoy were Mason Lohrei and Andrew Peeke, I can't blame them for wanting someone who benefits the team on defense more. $4.1 million is a bit of a sticker shock, I won't lie. But given the insane leap in the cap floor and ceiling this year, $4 million on your second pair isn't bad at all. I mean, heck, it's basically the Brandon Carlo contract. Plus, Borgen is still really good friends with Casey Mittelstadt from his time in Buffalo, as well as Morgan Geekie from his time in Seattle. This is gearing up to be a really cohesive locker room, and that dynamic is sure to aid the Bruins, who have always benefited from closely knit locker rooms. Cliffy Hockey is back, baby! I hope that Clifton has managed to find the humor in that nickname again. Having him back in Boston is always a fun time. We do love our retreads around here. And unlike previous examples, Clifton actually gives us reason to be excited for his return. While he has, like Borgen, not given us many reasons to be excited in terms of flashiness, he's always been a reliable bit of snarl to the bottom four for his entire career, while also providing solid defense when needed. On a lesser contract than Borgen, it's arguable that this is the better move between the two. And that happens to be the only major free agent signing the Bruins made all offseason. As previously mentioned, the vast majority of the movement this offseason came before the draft and before free agency. It seems to be a growing trend with the NHL as of late, because the offseason this year was defined by all of those trades. Byram traded, Eklund traded, Brady Tkachuk traded, Kyrou traded, Alex Tuch traded. By the time 12 p.m. July 1st came around, the pool of free agency talent was about as shallow as one of those inflatable pools that you get on the cheap and they end up dying on you midway through your second summer with them. I hope I'm not the only person who has that experience. And finally, with new draft picks and acquisitions in tow, we find ourselves at Warrior Ice Arena for a weekend with the Boston Bruins Prospect Development Camp. Now, this dev camp was rather interesting with three key absences. James Hagens and Kirill Yemelyanov have both been taxed heavily by the schedule they had down the stretches of their respective seasons, and Will Moore is still working his way back from injury. It's also possible that, in terms of Hagens, the front office sees him as having worked himself into a regular roster spot so quickly that they don't see the purpose in having him participate in dev camp. They did the same for Matt Poitras in 2024, where Poitras only participated in Monday skating drills and then was nowhere to be seen the rest of camp. But in terms of the active participants of 2026 Boston Bruins Prospect Development Camp for forwards, we had Niels Bartholdson, Cole Chandler, David Deputy, Beckett Hendrickson, Matvey Kotkov, Dean Letourneau, Mason Marcellus, Jonathan Morello, Casper Nasson, Oscar Olsen, Chris Pelosi, Cooper Simpson, Cole Spicer, Jackson Vaughn, and Will Zellers. On defense, Vasek Blanash, Max Burkholder, Elliot Gronwald, Loke Johansson, Christian Kostadinsky, Lincoln Krzyzewski, Dylan McKinnon, Cullen McCrate, Michael Newmeyer, Leon Pedersen, and Jacob Van Deven. For the goaltenders, Kyle Chavette, Roberto Enriquez, Yuri Ivanov, and Max Lundgren. So I get to Warrior Ice at around 9 o'clock on Monday, and not a moment too soon because holy heatwave, Batman! That was undoubtedly one of the best parts of Dev Camp this year, that I was in a place that I could see my breath in and not deal with triple-digit heat. I will also just say, this is my first time using these lapel microphones from Amazon. I apologize for the drowned out audio for some of this. It was cheap, it sounds cheap, and given the fact that the magnet fell off of one of them halfway through day 2, the build quality was cheap. But I digress. Immediate standout from Monday was Letourneau. In fact, I'll just say it now. Letourneau didn't just have the best camp of anyone this year. His development from 2024 to 2026 is like watching two completely different players, and I'm fully convinced he'll sign out of college in April. To everyone still upset over his freshman year where he played with a broken hand, get ready to eat crow. But beyond him, Zellers still looked unbelievably sharp in his skating on Monday.
Ooh, every single thing I see from Zellers, it is just insane. I love him.
And was on point during net front drills. Amazingly enough, Cole Spicer had also been strong for all of Dev Camp. Bouncing around colleges for the past few years has put his career on the line. And low-quality Bruins fans seem to concur that this was his last shot at showing the team what he had.
This is the last chance for them. This is the last chance for them at Dev Camp.
Last chance for them at Dev Camp. Gotta get the hair down. No one notices me. It's a bad hair day. It's very dirty. All right. Last chance at Dev Camp. I think Cole Spicer comes to mind immediately. Yeah. But you're looking at, for guys that should make the push towards the Bruins at some point, Pelosi. I think it's time. There's a lot to like about his game. There's a lot of aggression to it. Whether he can take that leap.
Right. He spent a while at Quinnipiac. You gotta see if it translates to the NHL at some point.
Yeah. And then Kostadinsky.
We fucking love Kostadinsky. We love Kostadinsky in this house.
We do. Big fans.
big fans of a big man.
Yes.
But it seems like he took that in earnest, with sharp skating and strong ice vision throughout the entire camp. However, the biggest standout from the forwards by sheer surprise was Matvei Kotkov. The shooting drills throughout the day amplified the positives in his profile. That he has a shot that is already NHL caliber. Through the first 2 days, I could maybe count on one hand the amount of shooting drills he had, even on goaltenders, that he didn't score on. His snapper is a bullet, every single time. But speaking of goaltenders, just because Kotkov was getting past them a lot doesn't mean they were awful. Ivanov, in particular, was incredible. His post-to-post mobility was spot on, and he has the tightest 5-hole I've ever seen in Boston. Wow, I really wrote that. As we transitioned into the defenseman proceedings, I was really excited to see Vasek Lanash, 4th-round standout from last year that had a powerful shot and wicked fast skating. However, one thing I was rather disappointed by with him is how little he's grown. Not in terms of his playing ability, he still makes full use of his 6'5" frame and has a killer of a shot. But only putting on 8 pounds in the past year? Still under 200? Not saying he can't still grow, but that's a rather odd proportion. Something I hope he's able to settle in the future. But the two defensemen who truly caught my eye were Elliot Gronwald and Loke Johansson. For the 3rd year in a row, Gronwald had the absolute best skating of the entire defensive roster. And I think he could mold into a solid bottom 4 defenseman once he's done at Quinnipiac. For Johansson, his skating and sustained pressure in board battles was unmatched. The former 6th-round pick is the definition of a defensive defenseman. Never going to put up many points, but of all the defensemen at development camp this week, I truly think that Johansson has the highest floor, as evidenced by him already playing with Providence starting last year. Will he elevate to more than just a high-quality AHL defenseman? That remains to be seen. Regardless, he's absolutely someone to look for as a call-up, should someone on defense get injured. As always, I like to give my top 3 of every day at Dev Camp, but this one is a little bit weighted, because Letourneau was number 1 every single day. As a result, I'm nixing him from the list entirely. Don't be upset, Dean, this is entirely because you were the best every day. In any case, the best 3 on day 1 were Spicer at 3, Ivanov at 2, and Johansson at 1. A great showing across the board. They flipped it around on Tuesday and gave defensemen first crack at the ice, to admittedly kind of disappointing results. Not in that guys were regressing, but rather in the lack of many full standouts. The only one who really gave me anything to look at was Colin McCrate, the 7th-round pick out of Fargo with the USHL. Against the board, he was pretty solid, strong poise with the ability to finish a check. Interesting to see what comes out of him next year in the NCAA. Only other defenseman that caught my eye was Christian Kostadinsky. Now, Kostadinsky has been an inside joke between me and my friends with the Short Shift podcast. You may have even caught a little bit at the end of that clip with Ian Loqual. 6'6", and with his main appeals being a BC commit and being an absolute bulldozer, with some major difficulties in terms of skating. 3 years after being drafted, his skating has absolutely improved a lot, but the one thing I keep noticing about him is his stiff hips.
Man, it's still so weird that Kostadinsky, for as big as he is, does not have that good of a shot, or rather, does not have that strong of a shot.
Everything feels like a very rigid motion, where the power comes from his legs more than anything. And while he's been able to improve his abilities, he still has a lot of work to do in refining skating, and especially shooting. He's never going to be an NHL player, which is understandable from a former 7th-round pick, but for a player I've gained a weird affinity for, I just want to see him succeed. Getting to the forwards, however, contains a little troubling development. I can't particularly discern if this was a matter of a bad morning or him still needing to work on his skating, but Zellers was catching really weird edges and stumbling a lot. He even had a bit of time away from the group getting coached on it. For such a refined prospect, it was a showing of sloppiness that was rather unexpected. Thankfully, he smoothed it over the rest of the day, but it was a bad start for him. But the big drill of the day was a puck underneath a folding chair that opposing players had to skate towards, corral, and then shoot. And this begins quite possibly the most interesting part of the whole week. The rivalry between Letourneau and Zellers. The two of them pitted against one another for the drill, and it was scrappy. Letourneau making full use of his insane wingspan while being challenged on every single play by Zellers' speed and hunger. It made for a thoroughly entertaining watch, not just from the perspective of watching competition, but also as a trend that I hope continues throughout dev camp in future years. It's healthy for prospects to be this competitive with each other, to drive them to be better. It brings out the best in them, and with smiles on their faces, it's clear there's no actual bad blood between Letourneau and Zellers, even though I would say that they weren't the best at the drill. The standout pair from the drill was, of all players, kind of a tie between Cooper Simpson and Beckett Hendrickson. The two of them were very evenly matched throughout, and with a wicked shot on both of them, Simpson especially, they traded ripper after ripper in ways I never expected. And Evan Marinofsky of the New England Hockey Journal seemed to agree with me that Simpson had quietly one of the best camps of everyone this year.
Who do you think, out of all the prospects that we've seen over the past 4 days, who has had sneakily the best camp? Not like Letourneau, Zellers, or Blanosh, just like a under the radar best camp.
Well, I was going to say Letourneau, but I agree. I like that you're going outside the box here. I'll go with Cooper Simpson. I think Cooper Simpson's had a really good camp. I think he's a really intriguing prospect, just given like where they picked him out of Minnesota high school. Had a really good year in Youngstown last year. Super skilled, really good release on his shot, and just kind of has that like it factor about him as a player that I think you can't teach. Like, he just can score. He's so skilled. So I would say Cooper Simpson this week's had a really good camp, and he's someone that at North Dakota next year with Zellers.
I was about to say with Zellers, that's going to be an amazing combination.
Yeah,
two of them.
That's the thing. I'm really excited to see those two at North Dakota. And again, I don't think he'll get buried there. I know they have a lot of talent. Like, Simpson should be a really good player this year.
Right.
Heck, this was also the emergence of Niels Bartholdson, as he demonstrated an impeccable speed, physicality, and shot creation that I will absolutely mention later.
Good job getting the body out from Bartholdson.
As we wrapped up day 2, my 3 stars go to Simpson at 3, Hendrickson at 2, and Zellers at 1. I know it's a little bit weird to have all 3 go to forwards, but there weren't very many standouts beyond them. Day 3 is when the fun truly begins. While drills allow you to hyperfixate on a specific area of a player's game, nothing gives a better look at what a player is able to bring to the game than, well, putting him in game situations. For this, everyone's on ice at the same time, which makes the standouts far more enjoyable to watch. In particular, we had a very startling and perhaps a bit saddening development. I fell for a camp invite. I know, he's likely not going to sign, but David Deputy from Miami, Ohio, had sharp skating skills and had a shot that rivaled some of the best. Heck, you know what? I like doing these top 3 lists, so the top 3 shots this year at Dev Camp were those of Matvei Kotkov, Will Zellers, and Cooper Simpson, but Deputy was absolutely 4th. Easily. I was talking with everyone around me, and they were all in agreement that we didn't want to hitch our cart to an invite. We didn't want to be attached, but we couldn't help ourselves. As for players we didn't have any guilt around being attached to, Niels Bartholdson had a situational awareness the entire day that no one could possibly compete with. And that's all well and good, but if you can't keep up, it doesn't matter how well you can see the ice if you can't do anything with it. Guess what Bartholdson has? While not as refined as Grunwald or Blanosh, his motor was incredible, and it's very promising for him in the future, especially when given a chance to flash that insane shot of his. But the biggest standout for Wednesday was still Ivanov. I've already gone over the incredible talents he possesses, but seeing it manifest in high-stakes situations throughout the day, he doesn't let a damn thing get past his legs. It's incredible. He doesn't have the greatest glove hand of the goalies, but I'd probably give that to Enriquez, but everything came to him effortlessly today. For that reason, the 3 standouts for Wednesday were Deputy at 3, Bartholdson at 2, and Ivanov at 1. And so, we arrive at the most fun section of Dev Camp, Scrimmage Day. As per usual, Thursday is separated into 2 sections. A 3v3 short ice tournament for the first session, and a 5v5 full ice scrimmage for the second. The most difficult part of this portion is paying attention to both sides of the ice at the same time, because you really can't. It's 2 games happening at once, so I just stuck to the side closest to me. But it gave me prime real estate to witness Bartholdson putting on a masterclass. He plays very aggressively for his size on the boards, has a nasty wrister, and an energy I hope he capitalizes on in Rogland next year. He's going to be starting in the U20 division again, but I can see him elevating to proper time in the SHL. I'm really excited for this kid out of the 3rd round, and Marcussi seems to be in agreement that he could have a lot more upside than anyone predicted.
You want to give me a quote of like who in the 2026 draft from the Bruins do you think will have the best career overall?
Wow, that's a tough go. I feel like it's so far out to kind of like say anybody could have like the best career.
I know it's a little bit of a projection, but still, like from like the highlight tape that you've seen so far, what who do you think has best potential? Really,
I low key when we picked him, he kind of caught my eye. The Bartholdson kid from Sweden. I did a little stat dive on him. I kind of like what he brings in terms of like statistics. I also liked his profile too. They said he was a bit of an more unpolished Viggo Bjork.
Oh wow!
I like that. For a small guy who can bring a little bit of snarl, a little bit of grit. So, but we'll see. Hindsight's 20/20, depending on how his trajectory goes, but he produced pretty good in U20s in Sweden when I looked at it. So, you got them. Yes! I want the lineup sheet, so that's why I got it. But
we got the lineup sheet.
Yeah, we're so hyped to be here at Def Camp, and Bex, I watched a few of your videos too.
Hell yeah!
You feel me? This man's doing good stuff on YouTube. You better check him out.
And check out Marcussi. You've been in amazing shit as well.
However, throughout the 3v3 tournament, one unexpected name stood out, and that was Kasper Nassen. Former 7th round pick had little more than a shot coming out of Frölunda and hasn't had much of an elevation after 2 years at Miami, Ohio, and is looking to change that in transferring to Lake Superior State. But in this 3v3, it looked like something was clicking. Solid skating all around, strong power forward traits, and even got a hat trick in one of the little matches. It was a blast to see. But after it all, the winners of the 3v3 tournament were Dean Letourneau, David Deputy, Cole Spicer, Loke Johansson, Christian Kostadinsky, Michael Newmeyer, and Kyle Chavette. As we went into the 5v5 scrimmage section, Letourneau and Zellers flashed some amazing chemistry. I really think they're going to be amazing as a duo once they're up in Boston. But for all the same reasons as was described in the 3v3, Bartholdson was the standout for the full ice scrimmage. Or at least he would be, if Roberto Enriquez didn't steal the show. The thing about Enriquez is he plays very low to the ground, which would usually be very concerning, leaving the top part of the net almost wide open, but time after time, he showed that he had the best glove hand of everybody at camp, even beating out Ivanov, especially during the final shootout drills, where they gave everyone a shootout attempt on the goalies. Which, by the way, some of the spectators who were at Dev Camp shouted, "You suck," at players who didn't score. I know this goes without saying, but in the words of Allen Iverson, we're talking about practice. Don't be an ass and tell players they suck during Dev Camp. Just a bad look. But with that out of the way, Enriquez more than earned the end of camp stretch. Thursday standouts pretty understandably, Kasper Nassen, Niels Bartholdson, and Roberto Enriquez. I suppose it's only right to give each of the aspects of the offseason a proper grade. I did that last year, might as well do it again this year. The new hires, I'll give a B to. I'm not entirely excited about Kevin Adams joining the Bruins front office, especially as rumors about teams looking to try and get Evan Gold as their new GM start to surface. If the Bruins were in a more polarized situation than they're in right now, where the team is in a weird transitional period, I'd have a little more faith in Adams, especially if it were more of a full-scale rebuild rather than a simple retool. McIlvane, however, I am stoked for. While San Diego wasn't great in his tenure from a performance standpoint, in terms of players he's helped to develop, I'm kind of excited. Kind of like how Sturm helped to develop Quinton Byfield and Brant Clark. McIlvane helped to develop guys like Leo Carlson, Beckett Seneca, Nikita Nestorenko, and Jackson Lacombe. While Nestorenko was the only player among them that spent significant time in San Diego, McIlvane was still a key part of developing them. So 2 coaches reunited after several years, who both have a lot of experience in elevating the talents of young players behind the bench of a team who has a lot of young prospects coming out the pipeline. Sounds like a match made in heaven. The draft is a D. While the shift in philosophy was rather jarring, considering the position the team is in, it was a little bit understandable, which is, quite frankly, the one thing keeping it from an F. While I sang my praises of everyone in dev camp, I think that there's still some wiggle room to be able to elevate this roster in the immediate future, and trading back in a draft as deep as this one is very discouraging. I love the Bartolson and Ivanov picks, and I had some nice things to say about Kotkov. But Ivanov isn't going to be ready until possibly 2031, 2032. Bartolson, all things considered, is probably going to end up being a bottom 6 winger when all is said and done, much to my chagrin, and Kotkov has boomer bust all over him. There was definitely an opportunity to move up to select someone, but the front office effectively wrote off the remainder of the potential of the current core with this draft. All that there is to hope for, really, is that Toronto sucks enough to win the lottery again in 2027 and we end up with Landon DuPont. Free agency is something I'll give a C to, which is honestly pretty generous. All things considered, I wish Sweeney had done more, but I'm always a little bit reluctant to put the cosign on getting every single big player. Large swaths of the Bruins fan base has what I like to call Dombrowski syndrome, usually characterized by the sudden urge to trade off major assets and draft capital in an effort to win the cup within an immediate window. And I understand the impulse, don't get me wrong. I love the thought of the Bruins hoisting the cup soon because David Pastrnak deserves it. But hockey is, more so than any other sport, driven by locker room cohesion. You can't just pick the sexy names to fill out the roster with zero regard to how the player in question works into the system. And I think that the Peterka trade, if just a smidge of an overpayment, is the best move we could have made this offseason. Should we have done more? Yeah, definitely. Some pieces on this roster still don't fit perfectly, mainly looking at Lohrei and Mittelstadt, and I wish we made the effort to move up at some point. But in the grand scheme of things, it could have probably been worse. The only thing that's kind of weird right now is we have nobody in Providence. Lastly, dev camp is the easiest A I have ever given. This year was not just defined in great part by the obvious participants in Letourneau and Zellers and Blanash, but also having consistent standouts from the lesser-known prospects like Bartolson, Kotkov, and especially Nasson on the final day was incredible. Dev camp is the perfect environment to try and polish some of those diamonds in the rough, and this year was an absolute masterclass. If there's one thing I could nitpick from this year, I wish Leon Pettersson made a better impact. A strong season in Voxo's U20 division elevated him to the SHL before the season was even done. I have no doubt in my head that he's going to be a strong blue liner for your Godins this year, but I wish it had showcased better on the ice at dev camp. Other than that, I have no complaints. Altogether, what grade does the offseason get? It gets a C. Yeah, a bit of a step back from last year. Definitely still some positives about this one, but a little bit more to criticize. The young core is progressing very well, but beyond Peterka and McIlvane, it's hard to see anything that makes this team demonstrably better in the immediate future. But I mean, this is also the team that added Tanner Jeannot, Sean Corrali, and Marco Sturm last year, and went from the single worst season since the mid-2000s to a playoff team. Who knows? This might actually be better than what we think. Hey, did you like that video? I bet you did because you got to the end of it. We're trying to make this a community to talk about the wonderful game of hockey. So if you like this video, why not scan the QR code next to me to join the official channel Discord? I know the NHL season is over, but we're going to be doing watch-alongs when games start back up in 2026 and 2027. We're going to be doing game nights. We're going to have a fun time here in the den. So give it a scan, or click the link in the description below. And if you extra want to support the channel, consider becoming a channel member. For a little more than a Costco hot dog a month, you'll get access to the members-only section of the Discord, prime real estate in my end slates, and every video essay one day early. Till next time, this is Bex from Into the Den, signing off.